Hello, everybody. This is Andrew Olsson of Pan Africa Football, continuing with our series of discussions about the African Nations Championship, the 2024 edition of the CHAN that is ongoing in East Africa, hosted by Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And with me, as always, is our very special guest, former the Gambia under-20 national team coach, currently a transition coach at current Danish second division leaders, Horsens, AC Horsens. We have Mattar M'Boge with us. Mattar, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, Andrew. Thanks for the invitation again, and a pleasure to be here, as always.
Pleasure is all mine. Been looking forward to discussing the end of the group stage. We just wrapped up the group stage at the CHAN, and plenty of drama, plenty of surprises, last day drama, controversial refereeing decisions. It feels like we've kind of had it all, Mattar. Just wanted to give the floor to you. What did you see in this group stage, and what do you think of the tournament in general so far?
Well, I think we were calling it one of the most memorable and one of the best CHAN tournaments of all time. I think that was only after the second round, so it's been breathless with all the games that have been going on. For sure, I think the three group 5-team format with one group only having 4 teams has brought these extra games and longevity. It feels like we've had a long run at this tournament. It's already been very memorable. For me, looking at the fact that all the co-hosts have qualified is history. It's a great sign, and I think it is an indication of what you will find in African football in terms of just the ball bouncing, it seems like, for host countries. And not one, not two, but 3 co-hosts have managed to qualify in the last round of 8 is history in itself. But the group stage, for me, has surprised me. I did not expect Uganda to top Group C. I did not expect Kenya to top Group A. I didn't expect Morocco and Algeria to almost struggle through the line, but they're there also. Certainly the VAR penalty decisions are at risk of maybe overshadowing the tournament, because it's already, the losing team or the teams that have been on the poor end, the recipients of the decisions, South Africa in particular, ending up drawing the game against Uganda, being knocked out, has created that narrative in terms of what's happening with VAR, and is another way to have that advantage. I think there's just more drama to come when I look at the way that the groups have been staged. From what I've seen now, it's an open tournament. I can say that any of the 3 co-hosts can win the tournament. Likewise, the likes of Sudan, the likes of Algeria, the likes of Morocco. It's only Madagascar potentially, I think, that will struggle, and only because they're coming up against a Kenya team that just looks like they just cannot be beaten right now. So lots to look forward to.
VAR, it always adds an extra element of drama no matter what competition it's in. And I think that's a good way to start our discussion. Group C ended on a very dramatic note. Uganda getting 2 penalty kicks in the last 10 minutes to draw South Africa, bounce Bafana from the tournament, and save their tournament as well, advancing them as Group C winners. There's just a lot to unpack from this game. What is your reaction to the results, seeing Uganda go through as co-host while South Africa are bounced in such dramatic fashion?
Yep, I want to have some sympathy for the South Africans, but it's difficult because, they've just been knocked out with the last kick of the game. A draw's not enough. I think they've performed well in the tournament. They've showcased South African talent. But again, it goes back to what we talked about before the tournament started, when we looked at the South African squad, that they didn't bring their best players. They brought players who didn't have contracts right now, who were free agents. And it's difficult to almost feel sorry for them, because if they had brought a stronger team, then potentially I think they could have been in Uganda's place in terms of topping the group and having a quarterfinal place. But I think that they didn't prioritize this tournament. It wasn't under Safa's, I think, priorities, as I said. The clubs also in South Africa, when I compare to the likes of Algeria, who have had to postpone some league games because their players are at the Chan ongoing, what is the South African clubs have. But in any case, the team players they brought, just fell short. And they can be praised, in fact, for the way they showed strong mentality and their attacking threat throughout the tournament. I don't know how Kutumela finishes without a club. I'm sure the minute he lands back in South Africa, he must have a meeting with somebody to offer him a contract. There must be someone who can appreciate his goal-scoring threat. But the drama was there in terms of the home team. And this is the power of having that home support. This is the power of hosting tournaments. It gives you something extra that cannot be explained. I think opponents will be able to explain it in terms of every time the ball bounces, anytime there's something contentious, anytime it's a 50-50, it's a decision for the home team. And that's just how it goes across world football. And for sure, the level of support that the Ugandans are receiving has helped them along in terms of the results. So for sure, looking at the game, a fantastic game entertainment-wise. But as I said, it's difficult for me to have any sympathy for the South Africans. Yes, congratulate them for their performances, but I'm not too upset that one of the teams going home, especially considering that they didn't bring their strongest group of players available.
I do feel for the players. You could tell it meant a lot to them to represent their country on such a stage. But that was kind of the general response when we discussed South Africa earlier in this tournament. Was many South Africans kind of laughed and said, nobody cares about this tournament here. It seemed like they cared a lot after this controversy from the penalty calls, huh? So I figured we might as well address it. What did you think of those penalty calls? The first one was an apparent sort of kick in the chest. Second one, a handball. What did you honestly think about those penalty calls that both went down to VAR decisions?
Yeah, I really like the way you pointed out also the fact that with the South Africans laid out on the floor after the game, yes, they definitely cared. I think it was a really good point you made. But for sure, the first one, and that set the tone for the rest of the game, I think, and gave Uganda way back in. I'm not 100% convinced. Was it a clear and obvious error? I don't think it goes into that. I think if it's at a high level, maybe it doesn't even get referred to VAR. So the fact that it did, and always when referees are asked to go and take a look, almost a decision is inferred. For the second one, it's by the letter of the law, the hand is the arm is in an unnatural position, and it does also block the path of the ball. If the arm was not there, then the ball takes a different path. Maybe it goes towards goal. Maybe it deflects off another part of the body and it goes into the net. So I can see why that was given for me, and I think there was really no debate for that second one for me. But as I said, going back to the first call, I think that was the one that put the cat amongst the pigeons, as we said, that opened the door for Uganda to come back into it. And a lot of the time within African football, on the coaching sideline, with players, they know that they can put pressure on the referee when in the last moments, the dying moments, any sort of contact in the box, you must go down because the referee is more than likely going to give it. We played enough games away from home where it was apparent when it came to the added time period and towards the closing stages of the game, you'd have players diving, not receiving yellow cards, referee not giving the foul, but because they're so, it's just too obvious. But it's a tactic. It's known and it's done. And the Ugandans, it wasn't, I guess, a blatant dive, if you like. But they've taken advantage of the fact that if you put sustained pressure as the home team on the opponents, eventually the referee is going to have a contentious decision to make. And the fact that they were claiming and all these different things just adds to the drama and the pressure for the referee.
The first one, like you said, it really set the tone. The second one, the second penalty doesn't happen without the first penalty. If you watch any high-level European league, particularly Serie A, anytime those arms are outside of the body, a lot of casual fans of football, they say, oh, he didn't mean to do it. There's no intent. Unfortunately, that's not the rule, right? It's all about if that arm makes you bigger. And that's why you see so many players come in and they have their arms tight to their bodies. They know that anytime their arms are outside of the frame of their bodies, they're inviting that call to come. But I think the first one, like you said, is a lot more to discuss, to unpack. When they get called over, the decision's almost made. It takes a referee very strong willpower, and you're almost kind of going against the grain to say, no, I shouldn't reverse my call. So it's a dicey subject, but if you want to look at it from Bafana's perspective, they should have beat Niger. It's a product of the entire group stage. It's not just that one game. And if you take care of business against the teams you're expected to defeat, then you're never in that position in the first place. Or if you don't lose your focus after scoring the third goal, or if you don't put the referee in those positions, there's ways to avoid that. And people tend to kind of focus on those individual moments rather than how they ended up in a moment like that deciding the game, I guess, is the way I would put it.
No, I like the way you put it, because they had 4 games, so 360 minutes of football to get themselves to the knockout stage. And yeah, it is harsh to almost reflect on just 2 moments out of those whole 360 minutes. They had enough chances, as you said, to beat Niger. They managed to beat the Guinea, who was a strong team. And for sure, they could have progressed. But like I said, I'm partly relieved in terms of we want to keep a standard in African football. We want to make sure that teams that take the competition lightly, like the South Africans have done, are not in the last 8, because it will dilute the quality for me. So I believe the teams that we have for the last 8, Uganda, I think they're worthy quarterfinalists. Likewise, the Algerians and the South Africans need to regroup and head back home.
Certainly. Moving on to our next co-host, let's take a look at Tanzania. Pretty muted end to Group B. It was already decided. It was more about the runner-up position, which Madagascar swooped in and took from Mauritania. With this Tanzania team, it was an easy group for them. Let's be honest about that. They didn't have anything to worry about on the final day. And now they're being put into a quarterfinal against Morocco, a team I don't think anybody would want to face at the quarterfinals. You win your group and you get rewarded with Morocco. What sort of change and intensity and atmosphere is this going to bring for a Tanzania team that waltzed through the group stage?
Well, I think of the time that Kenya played the Moroccans and how there's no way I don't think the Kenyans would have survived the match without the home field support, the home field advantage. So that's what gives, I think, Tanzania a slight edge. And you're right to say that they've not been tested in terms of Morocco having 4 difficult games. Maybe even the Zambia game, I'd say they were pushed. But for sure, they've had a more difficult group, games at higher stakes in terms of the quality of opponents in comparison to Group B. But that's not to say that the Tanzanians should not be credited and congratulated for the work they've done. Keeping the clean sheets, being very difficult to beat. It can feel a little bit like you're almost waiting for disaster to happen, because it's been everyone has been so comfortable so far in the Tanzania group. So you just think, is this the banana skin, or Morocco are a good team? They've won the competition previously twice, and it would not be a bad opponent to get knocked out of the tournament. But the Tanzanians have high ambitions now in the quarterfinals, because when you see the level of competition in East Africa now, that all 3 cohorts are through, the Ugandans, the Kenyans, they'll be fancying their chances against their opponents. So the Tanzanians will be saying to themselves, we need to get to the semi-final. We need to have bragging rights. We don't want to be out and then our other two neighbors are through. They don't want to stomach that. So I think that maybe is what can raise the stakes for them, that national pride and the fact that the whole country will be behind them. And I think they should be able to get a lot of positive support because, again, they're going to need everyone pulling in the same direction if they're going to beat a talented team like Morocco.
I think you're right. Once they get in the stadium and they see the atmosphere, they're not going to be sleepwalking anymore, or feeling like they've accomplished what they need to. The mission's been very clear with this team that they need the challenge to win this tournament, and hopefully, I can't see a scenario where the Tanzanians, don't show up for this match like maybe a couple of the group stage games. I think they're going to be there for this one. Everybody wants to beat North African teams when it comes to sub-Saharan Africa. I've learned it's always a special occasion in a tournament like this. So I'm excited to see what the atmosphere is going to be, and we know the players will bring the intensity. To close out Tanzania, I wanted to ask, do you think that we learned anything through this group stage about this Tanzanian team? We brought up their issues finishing, creating goals. That was one of the big questions with them, is whether they could consistently do that. Do you think they've answered our questions regarding that, or do you see any other concerns or positives that came up during their group stage?
No, the positives are surely definitely the defensive work that they've done in terms of keeping the clean sheets. Position analysis, they'll be looking at Faisal Suleiman, saying that he's somebody that they need to take care of in terms of minimizing the threats from Tanzania. But I like how you said it in terms of they've just almost cruised their way in, not so much trouble, not too much drama at all. And is this the time when the drama is going to come? But they deserve the credit for sure in terms of the performances they've produced so far. And actually, when I look at it carefully, when teams are able to win, even though they're not playing at their absolute best, that's actually a good sign. So they're looking like a team that can win the competition because they've just been in that, like I said, cruise control and not really turning heads at all, but still getting results, still staying unbeaten, still keeping clean sheets. And as coaches, other coaches in the tournament will be saying to themselves that they are dangerous because of the fact that they're still producing results and they're not performing at the best. And who knows, maybe the quarterfinal is when things can rev up and then it could be all systems go from there.
We see it so often in tournaments like these when a team gets off to a slow start. Argentina, the 2022 World Cup. As long as you get there to the important games, you can build up the chemistry. And it's the most intriguing quarterfinal for me, just seeing Tanzania, certainly high on confidence coming up against a Morocco team that maybe didn't go quite as easily as they anticipated it, but they're very battle tested after going through Group A. Which brings us to our last co-host, which is Kenya, who arguably I think is probably the story of the tournament so far. Neither of us had them advancing out of Group A, even with the co-hosting advantage. But they've won the group. They only conceded one goal. Benny McCarthy's been at his best in terms of being an entertainer as well as a master tactician and coach. The strong defense stands out when we look at the Harambe Stars in this group stage. Was there anything else that came out that stood out to you regarding this team and why they were able to navigate such a difficult group and win this group?
Yeah, certainly the contributions from Brian Ogum were timely. He's been the top scorer in Kenya, but it's also another thing to deliver when the pressure is on, especially the amount of pressure that the Kenyans have been under to win. I also think that the thousands and thousands of dollars that have been promised in terms of win bonuses has helped to drive the success. It's no small amount of money, and I think that has served as motivation. And I think Benny McCarthy said it in the press conference where he explained that all the teams are looking to do is to take the points, and then afterwards they're going to sit, and he made the counting motion in terms of counting their cash. And I'm sure he's played that speech in front of the players, or he's made that same speech in front of the players a few times, just to remind them to say that, listen, there's millions waiting for you. There's life-changing amount of money that is accounted for by what we're seeing. It seems like it's going directly into the players' bank account. So they'll be in the camp looking at their banking apps or whatever and seeing that the money is hitting and the numbers getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Andrew, let's not underestimate the effect that can have and the motivating effect that can have. You can't wait to get up in the morning. You can't wait to go to training. You can't wait for the games to start because you know that there's a huge reward there. And I think that has been a big, big factor. And let's not also forget Benny McCarthy. He has stood up, and so far, so good he's delivered. I think the players have respected the fact that he's almost taking a little bit of the limelight and the pressure away from them. He's happy to stand there with broad shoulders and talk the talk in the media, come out with jabs, as I mentioned, about the counting of money and different lines like that to say that, look, we're here. He's definitely from the Jose Mourinho school of coaching. When I see the team set up in terms of to not concede, that's the first objective, and then try to see if we can get a goal or two from a set piece or counter-attack. And you have to praise the discipline. You have to praise the structure. As you said, the defense has been the key. They've been keeping clean sheets, which is a hallmark of a quality team, and they've been managing to get a goal at the other end, which has been enough to win games. And I'm not sure if the hosts, if they were not playing in Kenya, I don't think they would have had the same results. I really don't. So the fact that the fans have played their part, the fact that there's been this huge financial motivation off the field, I think those is a hefty combination in terms of what we're seeing from the Kenyans overperforming from what I can see.
And now it's an intriguing situation because, they've been the underdogs in this group. I think everybody would agree with that, even though they were the co-hosts. Would have been disappointing if they didn't make it out, but I don't think people realistically favored them to make it out. But now they're in the quarterfinals. The expectations, of course, only get higher when you achieve something like that in the group stage. For a team where defense has been the real strength, how do you handle, as a coach, how do you deal with the mantle of being labeled favorites once you go into the quarterfinals and you have a match against a team like Madagascar?
It's a really important point. It's a really great point. As you said, there's a different mindset and there's different levels of expectations on an underdog. It allows you to go and play without that pressure, and it also allows you to play a certain type of football. It allows you to play underdog football. Now, when that gets flipped on its head and you're expected to beat the team, Benny McCarthy is going to have that conundrum in terms of, do I stick to what is working in terms of keeping it tight at the back at the risk of upsetting fans, the media, the public, in terms of how can we be defending against Madagascar? But then he can also weigh up the fact that if he opens up his team too much, that you're going to leave yourself vulnerable to a very, very good counter-attacking team, by the way, in Madagascar. I believe that he's going to bite the bullet and he's not going to care what people think, just as he usually is. And I think we're going to continue to see that defense first brand of football. And as I said, that's not the brand of football or style of football that's usually associated with favourites. He may take it in terms of giving the players more freedom, but I think he'll also be looking at the performances and saying, look, this has worked well for us. I don't want to take the risk to change it for the sake of plaudits. If we win this game 1-0, we're in the semi-finals, and that's all I care about. And I think that's going to be where he goes with that. I don't think the approach will change because they're the favourites in this game.
Well, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? The thing I think that's impressed me the most about McCarthy is just how he's been able to tactically adjust. This personality comes out so much, and it's easy to get lulled into thinking he's just a motivational coach or something like that. He goes in, the players listen to him, and then he motivates them. But it seems like what he's really been proving is that he has some tactical chops. He has the ability to make adjustments in the game. Tell us what you think about his ability to manage in-game tactical instructions and adjusting to situations.
No, it's a vital skill for coaches, and a lot of coaches out there, they're not sure how to read games. I think Benny McCarthy has done a fantastic job in terms of reading the matches that he's managed the team, and I think looking at the way that they've changed from back four to a back five, just to hold out a little bit more, be more defensive and solid, the way that he's left the wingers staying high at times, the way that the midfield is packed, that they're very aggressive when the ball comes into the midfield. They're really determined to win the ball back. I think, as you said, these are hallmarks of a very, very talented coach, of a tactician, in fact, and talked about the Jose Mourinho influence for sure. He's taken the notes. He's taken a full notepad of coaching notes from Mourinho at his time, because I can see some of, in terms of that structure, in terms of that tactical discipline in his team. But he also deserves credit, as you said, for adjusting to the opponent, taking into account that they've been going down to 10 men and then adjusting accordingly. And he deserves credit for that. This is a different tactical battle that's in front of him. It's going to be, I think, quite cagey, because the Kenyans will not want to go out, because they don't want to leave the spaces for the Malagasy players. Likewise, Madagascar are going to be playing on the counter-attack. They're going to say to themselves, we're not going to open ourselves up and leave ourselves with so much space to defend against the host country, Kenya. So it's going to be an intriguing tactical battle. And I'm for sure Benny McCarthy has to be at his best to get on top here, because Roro, the coach of Madagascar, is also very tactically astute, and he also deserves credit for getting his team this far. And it's just it'll be interesting to see the dynamics of the game. But I'm expecting a cagey affair, and I just wonder whether one of the coaches will take a risk and just play a bit more on the front foot. But I doubt it.
That's what we see in knockout games. Sometimes we want to expect all the entertainment, based on the drama of the occasion, but more often than not, it turns into sort of these 1-0, 0-0. It's going to be a unique challenge for this Kenyan team to meet the expectations, because Madagascar has nothing to lose. They've never really had anything to lose, really, in this tournament. And like you said, this Malagasy team, they know how to punish you on the counterattack. It's going to be a real tricky matchup for Kenya, but we'll see how it goes. But I think it's just like the Tanzania Morocco game. It's going to be just a very intriguing game to watch. I'm really looking forward to these quarterfinal games. I wanted to discuss a couple of the favorites, the traditional favorites from North Africa, Morocco and Algeria. We certainly talked them up a lot when previewing this tournament. Very experienced teams, players who've played at high levels in CAF club competitions, the Champions League, Confederation Cup. But in this group stage, it wasn't so easy for these teams. Morocco, they lost to Kenya. Bit of a surprise. First time they'd conceded a goal in a long time in the Chan. And then Algeria, after starting off so well, they dominated Uganda, beat them 3-0, 3 consecutive draws after that. So you're seeing some of the struggles that these teams encounter. Do you attribute this to just, hey, this happens in the group stage, there's going to be it's not going to go perfect? Or has your opinion of these teams as favorites, has that changed based on what happened in the group stage?
I think, having seen the opening performances of both teams, and then seeing the downward curve in terms of Morocco losing a game, in terms of Algeria not being able to win another game. They've kept a couple of clean sheets. Mahios was the top scorer The last edition is I think still hasn't hit the market. They've been far from convincing, both teams, and we were very praising of the North African teams before the start of the tournament. I expected them to top their respective groups. So to see them go second but still qualify doesn't alarm me. It only, I think, it goes down to complacency. I think after those opening games for both teams, I think for me there was a complacency in terms of not respecting the opponents in the next games. I'm sure the coach was not in line with maybe some players taking training not so seriously, not doing as much analysis, not doing as much preparation that they did before their convincing opening game wins. That's, I feel, needs to be addressed. And now that they're in the tournament where a loss takes you home, I think that might just help sharpen the minds a little bit. It might just help to focus the teams again to say, listen, because there's already a lot of noise in Algeria about removing Mattar M'Boge in terms of away from the team, and I find it incredible because he's proven himself time and time again, and it's just incredible that a coach like him the team has qualified for the knockouts and they're still calling for him to be sacked. It goes to the level of the intensity of football in those countries, in North Africa especially. And no doubt there's going to be pressure. Both teams will know that having reached the quarterfinal stage, Morocco was a former two-time winner, and Algeria as finalists in the last edition that they hosted. The minute they come home, the press is going to come for them. The media is going to come for them and ask, why didn't you win this tournament? Why didn't you get to the final? How could you have got knocked out by Tanzania in the case of Morocco and Sudan in the case of Algeria? So now they've got huge pressure in terms of not necessarily what they'll find on the ground in East Africa, but more about the reception that's waiting for them at home if they lose. Nothing else is expected apart from winning the tournament. And with the huge political tensions between Morocco and Algeria, what also adds to it is if one gets knocked out and then the other progresses. That's also going to add more to the political debate. That's going to add more in terms of the online debate and social media battles in terms of who's on top. So both countries know that these are games they have to win. And I think that's going to add to the level of those games in particular. And no doubt Tanzania will have to be at their best and Sudan have to be at their best. It goes without saying. But I believe because of what's waiting in terms of if they are knocked out, that the North Africans will ramp it up again and put on a good performance here.
And, now that we're in the knockout stages, we saw how these teams came out in the opening game. There's a lot of anticipation. There's a lot of buildup. Both teams did very well in their opening games. Are you of the opinion that having an experienced squad adds something in the knockout stage games and sort of games where there's a lot of buildup and there's a lot of anticipation? Do you think this is something that's going to favor the North African teams in the quarterfinals and beyond?
I think so. But then it's also, I look at Algeria's opponents in Sudan. They've also got lots of experience. The Tanzanian players have also got big CAF club games experience. Always in a squad, you want the players who are a little bit more experienced to lend an ear and some advice to the younger ones. The younger ones will also be wanting to say, oh, how do we deal with the nerves, or what's it like playing in a cup? What's the difference? They'll be sharing experiences, sharing stories. But you're right to say that the North Africans have the edge in terms of the big experiences, in terms of the big tournament experience. Not only members of the last CHAN for Algeria, but also at their clubs. Algerian football is one of the top leagues in Africa. Morocco is the same. We can get out at club level. They are under pressure. They're followed by the media. It's the number one sport in the country. It's the biggest passion in each respective country. So there is the pressure, as I said, to go again. But I believe that the slow start the fast start and then tailing off. Like I said, it goes down to the complacency aspect. But the fact that it's knockout football, yes, I expect the experienced players to use everything that they've gone through in the past, share stories, know about some of the little tricks as well. Algeria have a better chance because they're playing against a team that's not a host country. For Morocco, they will know that the Tanzanians are going to do all out, everything they can to give their team an edge. Sometimes you see that the day before a game, a whole group of fans decide to have a party outside the Moroccan team hotel, or they set off some fireworks, and all in the name of a celebration or a birthday party for 20 people. And it usually results in a group of players not being able to sleep and all these different tricks of the trade that we call it. But I believe because it's a CAF tournament, CAF are not going to take any risks in terms of any embarrassing stories. So we expect all the mind games to be restricted to what's going to happen at the stadium. As I said, the Algerians have a better chance because the Moroccans are facing a co-host.
Hopefully the fire alarms are well secured. The team hotels, that's another trick I've heard about. And maybe they turn the switchboard off for any incoming calls. We're going to touch upon each of the quarterfinals briefly in a little bit. I want to mention a couple of the notable failures of this tournament, a couple of the notable underachievers. First off, Mattar, we got to talk about Nigeria. We discussed them a lot. We discussed how difficult it can be for these players at this tournament. The pressure of playing for the Nigeria national team in any form is always massive, and there's always plenty of distractions. Let's cut to the chase. This was a disaster for the Super Eagles B. Out after 2 games. They closed out with a victory, hardly a consolation prize. Let's just leave it to you to take the floor. What do you think of Nigeria's tournament?
Yeah, disaster, a mess. I look at Eric Schell, the way he looks dejected in the press conferences. I look at how he struggles. And I know English is not his first language, but how he struggles to come up with the words and the answers to what's been going on. For me, I think there's a clear mismatch in terms of the tactical sophistication of how the head coach Eric Schell wants to play, and then how that message is being received by the players. Remember, I think it was Olsson who took the team, qualified the team to the competition, and then Eric Schell took over with Olsson as the assistant. For sure, there's been challenges in terms of the tactical messages, because even when I look at the mistakes that the team has made in the opening couple of matches, they just look like they have so much information to try to absorb and interpret in their heads, that because the head coach is so passionate, is so sophisticated, as I said, tactically, maybe he's tried to send too much information across to these players. And the level of coaching and the level of technical depth in the Nigerian league is not at the same level as Eric Schell. It could also simply be just the wording. I'm not sure whether Schell works with a translator or an interpreter on the field, whether he coaches in French and then he relies on the translator, or whether he's coming up with the English words himself. To me, either situation is not working, and is clearly hasn't worked because the players are not getting the message. And there is no way, in terms of what I see from the Nigerian team, that is an Eric Schell team. Looking at what he did with Mali, and look at how he's tried to get the Super Eagles to play quality football. It just goes down to the sophistication of the coach and his demands and the level of his expertise and understanding not being matched by the players he has available. Get them to play your style of football, because they're so used to playing with each other on a weekly basis. They're used to training with each other on a daily basis. They build relationships where you as the coach might give an instruction. Because, Andrew, we've been teammates for the whole season for how many years? We'll come back on the field and we'll have our own tactical discussion. We'll say, hey, we're going to do how we did it at our club. We're going to do this how we do it at Rival Stars. Hang on, no, we got to follow the coach's instructions. This is what he wants. Hey, let's do what works for us. Come on. and there's just been a mismatch in terms of, I think, trying to follow the tactical instructions of the coach. But it's been a disaster. I don't think there's any consolation in winning that last game against Congo 2-0. It shows actually how poor Congo must have been. But it's just too little too late. You cannot expect a Nigerian team with all the hype around the local league, with all the hype around Nigerian football, being at the top of African football and wanting to stay at the top of African football, that they come up with these results. And bearing in mind, these are also results that are counting towards the FIFA rankings. And I believe because of the results of the teams, maybe this will end up having the Super Eagles dropping down in the rankings, which is significant. And I don't think it can get much worse than what they showed in this tournament.
And you mentioned Eric Schell. You could just see him throughout this tournament. He just looked so dejected. He looked demoralized. He was coaching a lot. Casual observers, they see a coach directing and pointing where players should go, and we say, wow, he's coaching really hard. But that's maybe not necessarily the best thing, is it? When a coach is doing that much direction. I remember a coach here in Major League Soccer, he called it joysticking, like a video game, like he's literally moving the players around. It's not such a good situation. And you mentioned Remo Stars, how their players form a majority in this team, and the coach there is the assistant to Shell. Just the preparation. They had a couple friendly matches against Zanzibar that didn't look particularly impressive. How much of the blame for this failure do you believe falls on Eric Schell? The coach always takes the blame. The players never get the blame, as we see. But how much of the blame do you feel should go to Schell as opposed to maybe the federation, maybe the preparations and that sort of thing?
It's difficult to not look past the coach. It really is, because he's also the head coach of the main Super Eagles team. And it seems like because maybe it was because of the timing, but I don't think it's in his contract to take the Super Eagles team. I stand to be corrected. And then if it is in his contract, then he's obviously obligated to take the team. But we've also seen other coaches who are having a national teams to say, hang on a minute, I can't work here with this group of players. The gap is too big. We're having language issues. I think when he's with the Super Eagles, because those players are in high-level clubs where they're being exposed to tactical systems and different formations and different opponents who are also well-drilled and at a high tactical level also, they're able to understand somebody like Schell and his demands tactically. This team has looked so far away from it. And one of the issues that a team will always have is if you have so many players from one club, is that the saboteurs, the people who want to sabotage and make sure the team doesn't do well, they now have somewhere to focus on. They now have almost a reason to sabotage, because they'll say, look, how can he take players from one club and he's ignored this club, that player, this and that. And I can only blame Eric Schell for that. He's in charge of the selection. I don't think the selection had any undue influence. I think in terms of maybe if this was the team that made the qualifiers, then I can understand why he would want to come in and not change so much. But then if that's the case, then why take the team? You have to come in, and if you believe that there are better players or who can suit your demands and who can do what you want tactically, then go and find them and call them up and bring them in. Maybe he relied on his assistant, but I'm always cautious in those instances because I'm not sure how happy he would have been or how cooperative he would have been to have had the team taken away from him. I'm not sure whether, and listen, it's always difficult to say, but I'm not sure whether the players have really, really understood the demands of the coaching staff. And I say the staff because Schell would have relayed his ideas to the assistant coach, and then the assistant coach would have been relied upon to send that message back down to the players also. And it's a rolling, in terms of training, the drills, the sessions. Eric Schell is the one in charge of everything. He's the one who made the plan for the camp, for the friendly matches. The buck stops with him. We talked about it before the tournament. We said that if they go out, if they don't do well, then his job is going to be on the line, and that's exactly what's happening. I think, for me, having so many players from one club, particularly for a country like Nigeria, for me is asking for trouble. It's asking for trouble, and I really think that Shell should have shown more experience and a little bit more of wit to say that, look, if I do this, it's not going to be good, or it could be a potential danger or a risk to our success. And I'm sure amongst the Nigerian professional league that there are players who could have made a difference to this team, and there's players who would have been able to assimilate just tactics and taking them on board. I'm sorry, the buck stops with the head coach.
Nobody's ever going to blame the players or the federation. They're always going to blame the coach. You mentioned in one of our earlier discussions in Nigeria, they have over 100 million coaches in that country. From all their passionate supporters, I've already seen should Eric Schell keep his job, for the South Africa World Cup qualifier that's coming up. I admire his bravery and his passion to take on this job, but to coach Nigeria at the Chan, but it certainly increased sort of the firestorm of criticism and doubts that he's going to receive now in the next couple months as Nigeria try to save their 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign. But honestly, in hindsight, it's not going to be any different. It's always going to be that way. So I don't know. There's a lot that can happen between now and those crucial games beginning in September. Beginning next month. So we'll see what happens. Never short on drama in Nigerian football with the Super Eagles. So it'll certainly there'll certainly be plenty of news related to all that we'll see develop.
No, I think for sure the calls for some of the home-based players that's always prevalent whenever a Super Eagles squad is announced. It's like, where's the home-based players? Where's the home-based players? I think those calls, no matter what, I think they'll be diluted a little bit and quieted down. Unfortunately, there probably are players. There are definitely players who could potentially, who are playing in Nigeria, who could be called up to the Super Eagles squad. But now, after the showing in the Chan, I'm not sure that the support will be there to include them as it was before.
That's who suffers the most. It's a missed opportunity for these players to get some exposure. We discussed foreign coaches at the beginning of before this tournament, just kind of how many foreign coaches have taken charge of their teams. I wanted to touch upon briefly Avram Grant with Zambia. The Zambia team, it seemed like they were a step below every other team in Group A, even though this team appeared to be built to succeed at this tournament in some ways. A lot of experience, players who played at this tournament before, as well as with the full national team, but not a lot of good preparation, which was something that was acknowledged by Grant in the build-up to the tournament. How negatively do you think the results at this tournament, Zambia going out with a whimper, how much does this negatively reflect on Avram Grant?
For sure, it's a negative period in the country's football history. Looking back to when they've won the U20 AFCON, having the likes of Patson, Daka playing at the highest level, I think for sure this is a big bump in the road for them. But it's also a sign, I believe, in terms of the deterioration of the Zambian league. I think the quality of football and competitiveness in the country has declined. I can understand qualities in the squad in terms of experience as well, in terms of the technical ability, but it just seems like they're past their sell-by date. They've just passed their peak, and it needs now an overhaul in terms of finding that next generation of players. And it may be a while before the Zambians are able to produce a strong Chan team. They need to make it deliberate in terms of looking for younger players, getting them into the first teams, let them play first team football when they're 18, 19, 20. And then from the next Chan and the Chan after that, if they qualify, they're in a much better position. Because I really think that they were, when I look at also losing games and the fact that they struggled in the latter part of games also, losing leads, as I said, it just points out to poor fitness, poor physical preparation. Clearly, they've not had all the conditions that they wanted, I think. And in terms of, I look back at the fact that they were not involved in the first round, so they had a long wait before their first game. If there were problems in terms of bonuses or things that were promised to the players, it's a long time to sit and stew over a negative situation. And I'm not sure. Well, I believe that would have contributed to some of the performances, the poor performances that we saw. I agree with you. They were just not good enough. They were outclassed, and they're going home. And for me, it would have been very difficult, I think, for them to have qualified, even if they had some quality players because of the strength of the group, as we said. But now within Zambian football, there needs to be a long introspection because the quality just isn't there, and they need to have a deliberate way of addressing that. Otherwise, it may be a long time before they excel at the continental stage again.
Surprising to see Chipolo Polo just go out with such a whimper. They look like they were hardly in it. And like you said, I think you make a good point when you say there's so much that's going on behind the scenes that may explain why certain teams underperformed. And also, like you mentioned, with the prize money, with the co-hosts, why some teams are performing better than we could ever expect them to do. There's a lot that goes on, even beyond the training pitch, off the pitch, where these little things all add up to impact the performance on the pitch.
Fully agree. And that is the foot of the FA usually. And again, it's more the head coach's job to keep morale up. But it's difficult when there's that lack of motivation, and the team is back home now, and I'm sure nobody's really fussed. Nobody's giving them any pressure. Avram Grant's going to continue. There were no expectations of the team already. But again, it's also, like we talked about, similar to Nigeria. I don't think anybody has really held their hands up to say, I deserve to be called up to the Zambia senior squad. And that's another missed opportunity that we talked about before. But it's not late. It's still within the MA's capacity to come up with a plan, to try to find players, make sure that their talent ID program is robust and up to speed. They're looking all over the country to find quality players before they can start to feed them into the youth national teams that can eventually serve as a talent pipeline for their senior team and their charity.
We got 4 exciting, thrilling quarterfinal duels starting on Friday, on August 22nd. We have 2 co-hosts in action. We've already touched upon these games in detail. First off, we're going to have Kenya and Madagascar. Mattar, put yourself out there. Who you got for this one?
I can't ask Kenya. I can only because I think they've got the tools. If they wanted to play an expansive play, if they wanted to keep things tight, the options are there. And I think they've also got a coach who's proving himself at the highest level here, with the world watching. He's really galvanized the team, and he's really embraced the pressure and the expectations of taking his team to the final. I think that's what he's got in his head, whether he's shared that with the team in-house, but I think that's what he's looking at. So I can't look past them because, as we've seen, the home support has been such a deciding factor. And I think if they go one goal up, it could be a long afternoon for Madagascar if they concede early. Because, as I said, the weight of the crowd is going to be there and it's going to be against them. So Kenya's my pick.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cagey, like you said. Like, it's going to depend on if Kenya can get off to a hot start, then forget about it. But I think this game might be a little more complicated than maybe some Kenyans expect. It'll certainly be interesting. So the later match on Friday is one I'm personally looking forward to the most. Tanzania and Morocco. We have discussed it some. It's going to be a real intriguing matchup. I'm sure the Taifa Stars are going to have the full backing of the supporters this time around. So, Mattar, you were very high on Morocco coming into this tournament. I think that I'm really interested to see who you pick for this one. Who do you got?
Yeah, the stars are going to align. The Taifa stars are going to align again. Well, before I continue, did you give your prediction for Kenya Madagascar? By the way,
I just said it. I just said it was going to be cagey, but yeah. To
oh,
clarify, I will go with Kenya. I will
okay,
go. Yeah.
good. So one co-host has got there, and I think the minute the final whistle blows in that game, and Kenya have qualified, and the Tanzanian players hear that in the dressing room, then there's only one thing left for them to do. They're not going to accept going out of the tournament if Kenya have progressed. Just taking the game on its own, in fact, I think what's leading me towards the Tanzanians is the fact that they've not played to their maximum and they're still here. They've not played to their maximum and they're not conceding goals. That's really a good sign. They've got a coach. His nickname is Morocco, and the reason why he's been given that nickname is because he's a highly capable individual. The Moroccans, I can see weaknesses in terms of that resilience has not been there. I think that the Kenya game really opened their eyes and really shocked their system. They were able to get back on track very quickly, beating a quality DR Congo team as well, by the way. But the stakes are just at a different level for the co-hosts here. And as I said, the minute the final whistle goes in Kenya, then now it's Tanzania's turn to take the baton. And I don't think there's going to be any toleration, and I don't think there's going to be any hesitation in terms of what they have to do for that 90 minutes against Morocco. They have to play the game of their lives. It's the biggest game in Tanzanian football right now, Tanzanian football history, in fact. So the players have no choice but to go out. Yeah. I believe Tanzania will win.
I hate to be boring, but I agree. I think with Morocco, I admire this Morocco team very much. Good balance of youth and experience, but when it comes to Tanzania, we've seen players like Seru Girassi come into Dar es Salaam and misfire. We've seen so many teams come in, and that hostile environment combined with the motivation of the players, it changes everything. And you bring up a good, excellent extra point is that if Kenya get through, then the rivalry, the regional rivalry, really comes into play. There's going to be a lot of pressure on these players. I'm interested to see how they respond to it. I think Morocco has a chance in this game, but it's really difficult for me to go against Tanzania. I'm going Tanzania in this one. So, yeah, don't underestimate the power of hosting privileges when it comes to games like these. Maybe you could say that when it extends to the VAR review room, perhaps, too. So on Saturday, we got Uganda and Senegal. Senegal, we didn't touch upon too much in this discussion, but like we anticipated, their defense is incredibly solid. Navigated Group D more or less quite well. We were saying maybe they could have been knocked out, eliminated at the group stage. They've made it through. How do you see them faring against Uganda? Who do you have in this game, Mattar?
Two co-hosts are going through, from what I can see, but I think it's going to be difficult for Uganda. I think they've used up all their VAR, like the whole the VAR bank. I think is dry. But on a serious note, I do actually think the Senegalese are going to be difficult to beat, especially that they've got to this stage now as the defending champions. I think they're going to come together and really go all out against the Ugandans. If the Ugandans can absorb the power of the Senegalese and the pace that's going to be on show, then of course they have an opportunity. They're going to have to stay disciplined. They're going to have to stay strong in terms of everything that Senegal is going to give them. The home support also I don't want to count out. But like I said, it's it's only because they've used so much of it, so much luck, for want of a better word, that eventually it may run out. I'm going to put my neck here and say I think Senegal are going to cause the upset for this one.
All right.
And it's an upset, but it's the defending champions qualifying. But it's an upset in the sense of ruining the party for the home country, one of the host countries.
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it an upset based on what we've seen with the home boost these co-hosts have gotten. You know, I remember when we were predicting Group C, and you didn't pick Uganda to make it out of the group, and I bowled forward. I said, co-host magic, hosting magic is going to get them through. I'm not abandoning my cranes now, Mattar. So this is going to be the first one where we differ. I'm going Uganda. I think as long as it's in Kampala. Now, if they advance, they're going to have to play in, I think, Dar es Salaam, I think. Then, yeah, I'm not going with them there. But for this quarterfinal, I'm going with my cranes. They're going to we're gonna see all three co-hosts make it through. And I don't think I'm being particularly bold with it. But maybe with Uganda, I do feel a little bit bolder. But I'm going to keep riding Uganda, and we'll see what happens. But, yeah, like you said, the Senegal team is they look impressive, particularly in the defense. All right.
Are you going to be the VAR for the game, by the way? Is it you, Andrew? Are you going to be the VAR for the game?
For Senegal's sake, I hope not. But yeah, if there's any handballs, I'm breaking out Italian Serie A rules when it comes to the handballs. So the defenders they better all run around like this the whole time if they're trying to block shots. But I think this last game is really intriguing as well. We have Sudan and Algeria. Algeria, like you mentioned, Mattar M'Boge feeling pressure. You know, maybe he's got the FIFA Arab Cup to think about. And then Sudan, another foreign coach that we didn't mention in this discussion, but who we did in our last discussion about foreign coaches.
Because of where the Algerians have gone. I think the negative press against the coach and the team will be so overwhelming that the players will go out almost with jelly in their legs. And I think the Sudanese will exploit that. The way that they played so well against Nigeria, a 4-0 win is going to give them huge confidence. I think this may be one of the more cagier games. Both teams have got good defensive setups and quality coaches, as I said. Kwesi is quality, but so is Mattar M'Boge. But I believe that Sudan are going to cause the upset here and qualify for the quarterfinals. For the semifinals, excuse me.
I think with this Algeria team, I've just seen some kind of question marks with the team. You know, some giveaways in the midfield, things like that, which you don't typically see from a team like this. And like you mentioned with Mayus, we hyped him up a lot before this tournament. He's such a good player. Something's been off with him. There's been a real lack of explosive element in this Algerian attack outside of the opening game against Uganda. I really like this Sudanese team, and I think it could go either way. But I'm going to go with you too. I think Sudan is going to take this one. I'm just such a believer in this team. I think they have, and I could see it being 0-0 penalty kicks for this game, honestly. Both with good defenses, particularly Sudan. I think they've really leaned upon that a bit outside of, destroying Nigeria. So I'm going to go with Sudan as well. So, I don't know. Are we going to see both of the North African powerhouses out at the quarterfinals? Do you want to make any changes to your predictions? Are you sure you want to go with that?
No, but I think it's fair based on what we've seen. I think they've started off so well, but they've not been able to keep up that momentum for whatever reason. Whether it's, like I said, the complacency, but then other teams have stepped up their game, and the North Africans are facing two difficult opponents in Tanzania and Sudan. These are teams that if they reach the final or even won the tournament, I would not be surprised. It would not be a shock for me. For sure, they're going to be tested for sure. It's going to be two, I think games where we've seen the best of the coaching and the tactics that's available in the Chan, and hopefully we get entertained as well. Because when we follow these games, we want to be entertained. Of course, as a coach, you want to see some of the coaching nuances and the input of the different coaches on their teams in terms of organization. But we want to see exciting matches. We want to see players giving their all, heavy 50-50 challenges within the law. So this means something, because the future of this tournament has been under scrutiny for so long. But I think for sure what we've seen so far has justified the creation and the implementation of this tournament, because it's one of the best competitions at any level in Africa that we've ever seen. And to have these three co-hosts who are now in 2 years' time taking as co-hosts of the Cup of Nations, I think is a really, really good step, a really good sign for the future of African football, and in East African football in particular. How many players, how many youngsters have been inspired by what they've seen? If you're in Kenya and you're 10 years old, you'll be thinking to yourself, right, let me work hard, get into football, get onto the Chan team, and the president's going to give us all the money. The president's going to give us a house. You want to be motivated because of the love of the game, for the passion, of course. But I think what's happening in this Chan is immeasurable for those co-hosts. And the football in those countries, I can imagine, taking that momentum and going up to higher heights for sure.
Absolutely, Mattar. I think this has been a success for East Africa, and that was one of our concerns at this tournament, was how it's going to go. Are there going to be any incidents? Cross our fingers. Let's hope things continue to go smoothly with the hosting aspect. There have been, there's always going to be some, maybe one or two negative things that come out in the media or something like that. But I'd say generally, yeah, the interest levels remained high. I've been captivated. I think a lot of people have, been impressed by the quality on display. We haven't had it be all 1-0 results, things like that we might have feared, that we discussed about the Chan and the low scoring. So, yeah, keep it coming. I'm really excited for this quarterfinal round, and most of all, like you've emphasized in all of our discussions, having the co-host around still and not being eliminated just adds so much to this tournament. And I can't wait to see how they do. And if all three make it, if we see both North African nations go out, and then you also have Sudan and the defending champion Senegal have been forgotten about this whole tournament. I think maybe they're kind of relishing that a bit, and they'll be eager to remind us why they should always be taken seriously at this tournament. So looking forward to it.
And looking at your predictions, it's an all Sekafa semi-final. So all the semi-finalists are going to be from East Africa, Sekafa.
And the thing is, if you ask my journalists who I discuss African football with, they know I'm not particularly the biggest Sekafa advocate. So, yeah, maybe I'll definitely get maybe a little bit of snide comments coming my way. But, yeah, we'll see what I think about when I predict the AFCON. It might not be so favorable to the Sekafa nations, but all right, Mattar. Well, I always enjoyed the discussion. We certainly went into detail about everything. I always appreciate your time and your insights, and I can't wait to discuss what happens in this quarterfinal round with you after it finishes up. I think that's how I'm feeling. Any final thoughts before we check out?
No, it's intriguing. It's exciting. And as you said, just can't wait for the action to start, and looking forward to 4 quality games full of drama. And I'm sure there'll be lots for us to talk about in any event after the quarterfinals.
Friday, that is when the quarterfinals start. And then Saturday as well, we finish up with 2 more quarterfinal games. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned. Check us out next time after the quarterfinals. We'll have plenty of views, plenty of insights, maybe eat some crow about our predictions. We'll see how it goes. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.